the government's finally approved Woodside's Northwest Shelf extension.
The moment we've been waiting for.
Took them long enough.
All these years.
6 years for the state approval.
Yeah.
And just finally decided to stop kicking the can down the road.
Yeah. 2 instances of delay.
And then 2 weeks for Murray Watt to get his head around all the details, read an 800-page report, decide that UNESCO wasn't really worth worrying about after a couple of hours to consider that, and Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, I mean, not for nothing do they call him the fixer. Yeah.
The fix is in. What do you reckon? How's it landed?
I mean, look, yeah, it's been long expected, and certainly in recent weeks just seemed imminent at all times. I did so the week before the decision was made, I had this sense of like, we're fucked, this is depressing, we're just getting destroyed, we're losing so badly. And then I must say the few days, or the 2 days really, a couple of days before the decision was made, that all kind of flipped around, and I felt like we were winning, and it felt great. I was like elated. I was feeling so good.
So how did it feel when the news came, when you were setting up for a press conference at Parliament on Wednesday?
Yeah.
Lunchtime?
Well, it almost felt like we were winning too hard, and they were just like, nah, bugger this. We've got to nip this in the bud.
Yeah.
Like this could roll on further.
Yeah.
And they just did it. So, I mean, look, yeah, it was, I was pretty shattered. Like I was tearing up a bit during that press conference. So what happened was we had a press conference scheduled for 12. We, being broadly speaking, I suppose, the environment movement. And then was in a meeting. About halfway through the meeting, someone said, Murray Watt's doing a press conference at 12. Mm-hmm. He did his. And then, yeah, I was kind of crowded around an iPhone trying to watch a live stream.
Saw it on Channel 7 News.
Right, yeah. We couldn't actually find it. So,
I saw you trying to find it.
You saw me on Channel 7 News. Yeah, right.
You guys were live streaming.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
the reaction video.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Maybe that's why we couldn't find it.
Yeah. It's all about the kind of the secondary, the run-throughs these days.
The reaction shot. Yeah. I mean, look, like totally to be expected, especially after the election outcome. I think if the election outcome had been different, we could have been looking at a pretty different world, but it seemed like it was going to happen pretty quickly. I mean, I didn't think it would happen quite this quickly.
Well, maybe we should just kind of, for those who haven't been sort of immersed in the cut and thrust of it as much as we have for the past couple of weeks, just kind of unpack what it's looked like. Maybe since the election or since Murray Watt was appointed Environment Minister, like it's been kind of crazy, really. Like I'm not really sure I've experienced a week in the campaign space quite like the last week, just in terms of the volume and pace of developments. Like it was a fucking movie almost. There's been a lot of twists in the tails, a lot of fourth quarter action.
Yeah. Let's track them back, because honestly, it all feels a bit muddled in my mind.
All right,
so you might be able to guide me through.
It starts with the election, and obviously the Northwest Shelf is a name that a lot of people are now immediately familiar with. Not the case for much of the 6 years it's been tracking through the approval process. It's a fairly obscure description for a gas plant up on the Burrup Peninsula, which, Woodside first applied for an extension, I think in 2018, 2019, don't quote me on that, but it's been moving through the process for a fair time. But the federal election campaign really kind of boosted the political profile for a certain cohort of people, people in the political space, after the coalition and Peter Dutton in particular made the Northwest Shelf a kind of a cornerstone of the first week of the campaign, insisting that they would fast track the approval within 30 days of being elected. And obviously the election outcome was that Peter Dutton was in no position to fast track anything. Not only did the Libs fall off a cliff as a whole, but Peter Dutton, fell out of Parliament entirely. But then fairly shortly after the election, the reshuffle of cabinet meant that Tanya Plibersek, who delayed the decision a couple of times, was moved elsewhere. Murray Watt, the fixer, comes in and fairly quickly says that he intends to approve it within 2 weeks by this May
So
31
tends to
deadline.
make a decision. Yeah.
Beg your pardon, yes. But having said which, the language from the outset, from the day that he came into the role, the language, there was nothing explicit, but it all just pointed fairly firmly in one direction. I think everyone could see the writing on the wall.
And like increasingly so as it got closer and closer.
Yeah. You had Albo coming out at a press conference, I think it was early this week, but it kind of blurs, the last fortnight sort of blurs into one kind of montage, really talking about the importance of firming gas for East Coast markets to keep the lights on in the Hunter Valley, quite how that connects with
that's just absolutely bonkers. Like that shows that the level of disconnect from reality here is like, like that's akin to climate denialism. Like it's just like pure...
To pretend that a gas export project in the northwest of WA has any connection with the East Coast power grid.
And he knows that as well as we do. Like he knows that this is a gas export project.
And to be fair, I've seen even some... some media luminaries such as Laura Tingle repeatedly kind of debunking that fallacy. And the fact that has kind of got some cut through, I think, speaks to the work that's been done to expose the myth of, gas exports in any way contributing to Australia's energy security, but also just to the profile this issue this project has drawn over the past week or two. But anyway, you've got kind of Murray Watt and the Prime Minister sounding entirely as though this is only going in one direction for much of the last 2 weeks. I think on Wednesday, I can't even remember what it was. There was Wednesday last week, it just felt like it was a done deal. Murray Watt, I think he'd been in Perth for a couple of days. So the first thing that he does after being appointed Environment Minister is says that he's going to fly to Perth to meet with stakeholders. Yeah. Those stakeholders, of course, being kind of prescribed to a fairly small circle of industry elites for the most part. He didn't fly up to the Pilbara to see the place for himself.
No, despite repeated invitations.
Yeah, and including not just from what you might kind of construe as the usual suspects, but sort of the CEOs of some of the traditional owner groups up there calling on Murray Watt to actually make an appearance on the ground. I mean, on the face of it, it's pretty fucking extraordinary that you'd decide to grant a 45-year approval for a project on the land of 5 traditional owner groups in an environment where, your government ostensibly came to power talking about reconciliation and truth-telling and treaty.
And where there's an outstanding application from some of those traditional custodians for protection of the place that many people and organisations made submissions to. Yeah. Like the fact that was a live issue, the Section 10 application under the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Heritage Protection Act, and he didn't go up there to talk to people, I think makes it even more outrageous. Yeah, which then kind of neatly segues into the end of last week, wherein after a couple of days in Perth hobnobbing at a mining summit at the Ritz-Carlton for the Environment Minister, while Greens and independent MPs were flying up to the Burrup in kind of last-ditch attempts to sort of shine a bit of light and do a bit of final kind of ground game campaigning. Raylene Cooper, full disclosure, long-time friend of the pod and someone we've been, campaigning alongside for a long time, launches a federal court challenge on Thursday afternoon, which becomes public Friday morning, essentially trying to force the Environment Minister to deal with this Section 10 application that you've just spoken to before making a decision on the Northwest Shelf. She's been kind of saying for some time, along with the others, that this guy's got to come see us and he's got to fucking deal with this submission, which has had more than 800 people kind of help to produce a report that's been sitting on the desk of the Environment Minister for the last 3.5 years. And then when you think the week's got nothing left to give, Friday afternoon, they finally dropped the MRAP, the Murujuga Rock Art Monitoring Report, Year 2. Which I think was the low point for me when that came out. And the way it was spun. And in fact, I'd just been having like a break. So I was up on the Burrup kind of for the first time all week. I just had an actual little break. I was out at Houston's Cove, had a little walk through the mangroves, beautiful, peaceful, quiet, still. Get back in the car, check the phone, and then see the headline of the Murujuga Aboriginal Corporation press release. Which was something like Rock Art Monitoring Program. What was the word? Was it disproves or I think it was rebuts acid rain hypothesis. That's right. Rebuts acid rain hypothesis. Yeah. Yep. Fortunately, there are some quick thinkers among the scientific community and people who can peruse 800-page reports in the course of a single weekend sitting.
So Friday afternoon, a few groups, including the Greens, who were up on the Burrup at the time, and Raylene Cooper as well, sort of made comments along the lines of interesting timing to get this report that the government's had for a year out late on a Friday afternoon in, the week prior to this decision that everyone knows the WA government at least is desperate to secure an approval for. Watch this space, ... And then early this week, by which I mean, last week, the scientists get in on the act. And I think that was, there've been a lot of press conferences about the Northwest Shelf over the past couple of weeks, but possibly none as dramatic as the professor of world rock art at the University of Western Australia absolutely going to town on an A4 printout.
It was honestly one of the best moments of my life. I was just like watching that, just kind of overjoyed. Like, it was the best press conference of all time. I've never seen anything like it. I doubt I ever will again.
My eyes were bulging. My jaw was on the floor. It was a real awooga moment for a Burrup tragic and a media junkie such as myself out the front on the front steps of WA Parliament. The WA Premier, the little rat, has just kind of done a spin around, spruiking, and for what it's worth, an eminently positive and necessary and overdue plan to recompense survivors of the stolen generation for being ripped from their families. That's great. You've got to say the timing of that, when the government knew that that the rock art report was kind of falling apart before their eyes. So this rock art report is something that's been a product of government and industry funding. They've spent years with a team of Curtin University scientists kind of trying to establish some framework for whether industrial emissions are affecting the rock art up on Murujuga. There's been a lot of contest and controversy around the way that the report is produced. The science behind it seems fairly solid, but the WA government ultimately pulls the strings in terms of how the report's released and to whom and when. And Benjamin Smith, who is not contributed to that report but has been studying the rock art up on Murujuga for a long time and one of the kind of the world experts in this field, basically, I mean, there's no kind of, you don't need to paraphrase or anything. He stood up and said, I'm here to blow the whistle on a government cover-up around the rock art report, and proceeded to tear the executive summary to pieces in front of the press pack.
And it's worth pointing out, I think, that he was very complimentary of the scientific work within the report. It was the executive summary which he said government
had been doctored.
Had rewritten, which there was confirmation of later in the week that is what
precisely. So then this was I think it was Monday. Maybe it was Tuesday. Who knows? I think it might have been Tuesday.
I think it was Tuesday.
Wednesday morning, the ABC come out with a story that almost just sounds like it's a report on Ben Smith's press conference, but in fact, it was another sort of international rock art expert, this one who'd been the chief statistician on the Curtin University study, basically writing to the government to say, hey, your report, the executive summary, you're omitting key information that is relevant to presenting this science fairly.
And you've edited my graph, right?
Yeah.
That was the kind
the teal line.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really quick turnaround. I think you don't normally see a narrative with this much invested in it at multiple levels of government with billion-dollar decisions riding on it fall apart in front of your eyes quite as quickly. I mean, I think the reason they got it out on a Friday afternoon was precisely to hedge against anyone having any time to really interrogate it. But fortunately, people worked the weekend and were able to turn around early the following week and say, hey, this is trash. This is this is an absolute rort and a stitch up. And it kind of, if anything, is possibly the best and clearest illustration we've ever had of what we have been talking about for a long time on this podcast and in general. Yeah. And what's sometimes called the captured state.
Capture, yeah. Which is often so kind of suggestive when people talk about it and implications, and there's rarely something, I mean, never something that I've seen that is as direct as this, where the government is literally rewriting the work of scientists to suit the agenda of fossil fuel companies. Like, it is mind-blowingly outrageous.
It is. It's so overt, and you get Roger Cook rocking up on RM Breakfast to spruik this stolen generations compensation package, but instead getting grilled for about 10 minutes about this very stitch up, and resorting to describing the scientists involved as engaged in a political frolic, basically saying, well, I mean, not even basically saying, almost word for word, you can't trust the scientists because they're too political. You've got to trust us politicians to explain the science to you. So don't read the report. These guys have they've got their agendas and their biases, but you've just got to let the good old WA government give you a quick rundown of what the important bits are to take home.
It's perverse. It's absolutely perverse.
And I mean, he sounded like shit on the radio. It sounded like the pressure was really getting.
The guy must just be in a state of like spiritual and emotional crisis. Given everything that people say about him and who he is, the fact that he has to stand up there and do that must just be like soul destroying.
You would think so. I think more and more immediately there probably is just the realization. I mean, I can't imagine what the back and forth would have been between the upper echelons of the Murujuga Aboriginal Corporation, Woodside, and the WA government. But there must have been a fair rising note of panic, I would think, as the kind of the narrative that they had sought to build through the executive summary, not through the report, but through the executive summary with a few key tweaks to a few key data points to suggest that actually if there was any damage, it had happened about 50 years ago.
Which is just so counter to it's counter to what's in the report, but also counter to just common sense.
There were journalists saying to me within hours of that media release coming out that basic parts of the kind of the theory, the premise the government was relying on didn't make any sense. Firstly, how was one to believe that there were more emissions impacting the rock art in the 1970s than there are today when the industry barely existed on the Burrup in the 1970s, certainly none of the gas plants we're talking about now. And there was no fucking functional emissions monitoring because there was no need for it back then because no one even considered the kind of...
it wasn't on the radar.
Yeah, precisely.
I think there's a couple of things here. One is that they just massively overplayed their hand.
Yeah.
Like they could have done what they did with the first version of the report, the 2023 version, and spun it as inconclusive, not sure, more research needed. And then I don't think they would have opened themselves up to the same degree of scrutiny.
Yeah, I just think the WA government has... by intervening or interfering to the extent that it has, not just in the scientific process, but also in how that is presented to the community most affected, have really stirred the hornet's nest. And they're kind of, they were clearly feeling pretty stung, I think, by the middle of last week.
Yeah. I mean, the other telling thing here is that no one, since that press release was put out, apart from Roger Cook and the government, has defended that report. Like they haven't been able to put anyone forward. They keep saying there were 50 people who worked on that report. There's, supposedly people from Murujuga Aboriginal Corporation who are involved in that.
Yeah.
No one's been on the public record to defend it.
No, I mean, the only thing they did put out was this, another Friday afternoon release. On Friday afternoon this week, Curtin University put out a statement from that chief statistician, Adrian Baddeley, who'd called out the removal of key data points from his research, essentially trying to kind of smooth over the friction that had been caused without actually addressing any of the key points. Instead, just making the point that the science was solid, which no one had actually been contesting at any point. So there've been attempts to kind of to cover up the cover up effectively. But I think the stench that has been left behind, the kind of the overt corruption that appears to kind of
there's no other word
run
for
behind it is really a sight to behold. And something that's kind of, I think the interesting thing about the timing, you said that by the Wednesday when the decision came down, and we'll get to that in a second, it felt like it was kind of, almost like there was too much building up against them and they just had to kind of rip off the Band-Aid and get it over with. I think the other part was if this had been allowed to run much longer at a more normal pace, the kind of the narrative or the tapestry, the body of evidence of this graft and cover up would have been so on the nose and in your face that there would have been serious questions being asked about the kind of the accountability and who was responsible for which parts of this. Whereas because it's been such a flood and such a rush, it's kind of almost been too much to pick apart at this point so far. Anyway, I'm sure there'll be retrospectives.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think there's plenty more to come. There was another document that dropped on Friday, as well as the MRAMP report, which I think is significant here, which was something that was posted to Murray Watt's LinkedIn. Do we want to deal with that one, or do we save that one for later on?
I mean, I reckon let's just cap off the week that was.
Okay, all right.
Let's just finish one narrative before
Because that also felt like a real low point, but we'll come back to that one.
Yeah, just park that for a second. So Wednesday morning, the ABC have got a second whistleblower from among the kind of the few rock art experts who, know what's what up on Murujuga. Then almost, before you've barely had a chance to catch your breath.
And they had an anonymous source as well, just to go back to that, right? So they had two on the record and one anonymous.
Yes, precisely. Yeah. Then Roger Cook gets on the radio, stumbles his way through a pretty embarrassing interview, pretty clearly caught on the hop, and feeling a bit exposed. Then UNESCO, the United Nations body that determines World Heritage status for sites and monuments of outstanding universal heritage value, just casually drop onto their barely functional website a document suggesting that in a couple of months' time they're going to knock back the World Heritage status that has been kind of the gold standard held out for Murujuga as a kind of a fig leaf for all the industrial damage by the state and federal governments for the last few years. UNESCO turn around and go very, very, very explicitly and clearly, we can't approve World Heritage for this place because there's too much evidence of industrial damage from specifically the project that you're about to approve.
Yeah. And that was the advice of ICOMOS. What does ICOMOS stand for?
Oh, fuck no. It's the International Centre for Monuments and anyway.
They're world-leading experts.
I mean, they're literally the world body, the global peak body for rock art research.
Yeah.
So they presumably know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
They say, sorry guys, can't approve this right now. If you can sort out that little emissions issue, we'll come back to you next year. Send it back to the government. And 3 hours later, Murray Watt gets up and says, thanks very much for your feedback. We've decided that we're going to choose the gas export facility over the World Heritage status on this occasion.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thanks for playing.
Yeah, so basically Albanese and Watt and their government have effectively wrecked the World Heritage nomination or refused the World Heritage nomination. Like they have decided that it's not.
I mean, I don't honestly, as I said a second ago, I just don't think there's been time to fully kind of like pass out the threads here. But I think the most extraordinary aspect of all of this, putting aside the kind of the cover up, which I'm sure will bear more investigation and will further unravel in weeks to come, the mere political fact that on Wednesday morning, UNESCO say no World Heritage for this extraordinary, like unique rock art site of unparalleled universal significance until you get rid of the industry that's fucking it up. And the government respond literally 3 or 4 hours later by saying, we've just decided that we're actually going to give the biggest industrial project that's most responsible for fucking up this exceptional rock art another 45 years to continue doing that. I mean, the message that sends, I think, is like it's kind of almost, it's hard to know how to respond. Like for a government that, putting aside the climate stuff, we've barely talked about that so far, but for a government that not only came to power and kind of gained an increased mandate, ostensibly their first term was pretty much fucking all about, on the face of it, climate and cultural heritage. Like they were basically going to deal with the Liberal Party's failures on climate, end the climate wars, and they were going to deliver a referendum to recognise Aboriginal people in the Constitution. And within the first weeks, within like the first fortnight of their second term, they turn around and approve the biggest climate bomb, the project that's going to contribute most to climate change and destroying Australia's credentials, while at the same time trashing the most significant heritage site we've got at the moment is, I don't know. It's kind of remarkable, really. And I don't think anyone's properly kind of responded to that as yet. Maybe it takes a bit of time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, perhaps their thinking is, fuck, we've got to do this. Let's take the hit now. And then we've got the rest of our term to kind of build up our goodwill back up.
And I mean, no one's saying it's going to hurt them. I don't think. I mean,
I think it is going to hurt them though. I think that this has damaged them quite significantly, like amongst Labor people and amongst their base, and amongst people who voted for Labor and had no idea that this was on the cards for reasons which we might talk about later, and who are now shocked and surprised and angry and outraged. Like I have been amazed at the depth of feeling out this about this just out there in the community that I've seen through people that I know who aren't particularly engaged about these kind of issues. Like, I was at a party the other night. People don't talk about this shit. They were all talking about it, like not separate from my involvement in it. It was something that was on there.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think this one's cut through? Because we've spent a lot of time trying to make it cut through.
We've spent so long. And I mean, that's been like the incredibly frustrating thing here is that we've spent years trying to get this to cut through, and it feels like it all happened at once within 3 days when it was kind of too late. I mean, it's always going to be that way, like with these kind of things to some degree. But I mean, I think it's the biggest fossil fuel proposal in, one of the biggest ever in Australia. The bigger than anything approved by the Morrison government, the biggest that Labor's approved. And it's the World Heritage listed rock art. I mean, I think that seems to have come into people's consciousness as well, like to a way bigger degree than it has ever. And so I guess, why didn't it come? Why didn't it capture people the same way when we were banging on about it for all these years?
I guess you've got to kind of see it to believe it. Maybe. I mean, it's ever thus, right? It's sort of it takes. I mean, it is a decision development. Like it's the crime of the century. It's fucking unbelievable the way that they so nakedly just kind of plow through. Like I honestly felt, as I think you did, that we had piled up enough over the past couple of weeks to slow them down. Like it was always going to end this way. For the record, like I don't think anyone seriously thought we were going to get a different outcome.
I mean, some people that we know talked about possible conditions, being till 2050 or something like that, rather than 2070. I mean, I can't say I ever thought that had much chance, but I guess there were other outcomes available. But sorry, we thought that it was going to be delayed, right? I definitely had a sense kind of Tuesday, Wednesday, that they were going to push this down again. It would have been super easy for Murray Watt to do that. He would have said, this new evidence has arisen. I need to have a look at it. We need to do this properly. I've done my best. I've done everything I can. I've done what I said I would, but I need more time. And I don't think anyone would have begrudged him that.
So why didn't they?
I just don't think he wants to. I think he wants to push it through. I mean, apparently the guy hates Greenies. He hates the Greens political party. He seems like a scrapper. He seems like he likes a scrap, and that he kind of
he's also got a reputation for knowing how to kind of like walk the line though, and to not kind of like he's not someone who goes around scoring own goals. You wouldn't have thought, or kind of or trashing capital unnecessarily. Like it's got to be calculated. It's got to be calculated in terms of pure political expedience. And clearly, the verdict or the decision, the calculus is that this is a net benefit for Labor, for the ALP. It delivers something to an audience that outweighs the cost with a different audience.
Is that partly that they just don't want to pick a war with the gas industry? Like they've picked their battles for what they want to achieve, and taking on the gas industry is not one of them. And so they see the risk of the gas industry going after them as greater than the risk of people like us going after them.
And the thing
which is probably a pretty good calculation the way things stand.
Well, because people like us don't go after them.
Exactly.
By and large. Like if you kind of compare and contrast the response of the general approach of the gas industry versus the kind of the environmental movement, the climate movement, the big green groups. As you say, the way that the APIAs, the way that the gas industry and the CEOs leverage their influence is by threatening to fuck Labor up. The way that
they bully them. That's how they do it.
They threaten them with a big stick. The way that the green groups try and do it is by promising a carrot, by saying, we'll say nice things about you, or we won't attack you if you do what we want.
And just by sucking up to them and just thinking that like by getting in the office and having the conversation and being best little buddies with them.
Speaking of which,
you can therefore influence their behaviour.
You wanted to talk a little earlier about a Murray Watt LinkedIn post from last Friday afternoon, which I suspect probably illustrates this fairly well.
The dynamic,
You want to paint a picture?
It was Murray Watt sitting in his nice little office or boardroom or whatever. Up on the screen were the CEOs or leaders of various environment groups, including Greenpeace, the Australian Conservation Foundation. I don't know who else was on there. There were four or five of them.
Someone else.
He posted this to his social media showing how great he was because he was consulting with these environmental groups. Of course, all the environmental groups had been falling over themselves in the media to say, we want a meeting, we want a meeting. It wasn't a meeting to talk about the Northwest Shelf because he wasn't consulting with environment groups on that. He did a very skillful little kind of packaging up of the nature laws and the Northwest Shelf, which I wrote about in The Week in the West on the last post on Earth a couple of weeks ago, that was kind of what I thought he was going to do, was to kind of feed them on the one hand the nature laws so that they shut up about the Northwest Shelf. And I think that's kind of already beginning to happen to some degree in that they want to maintain access, they want to have a win so that they can report to their donors and their KPIs or whatever that they've had a win on nature laws. And so they're going to go easy on the Northwest Shelf. And what's the end result going to be? What is the use of nature laws if you're approving gas exports until 2070, worthless? And also, what are the EPBC reforms that Labor's going to deliver going to be? I can't see Murray Watt coming through and offering anything of substance, especially after what happened last time when Plibersek tried to reform those laws. So
in that case, where like if one was to kind of recalibrate how, as an environment movement, you engage with a government to leverage power and to get what you want, like where is that leverage? Where can you actually exercise influence? If it's not by getting meetings, if it's not by kind of calling them out in the press,
you need to get the meetings, but you need to get the meetings in a context where they're scared of you. And you need to call them out in the press in a context where they're scared of you. But they're not scared of the environment movement because the environment movement doesn't have the popular support behind it that it would require.
Well, and the environment movement actively collaborates to help Labor get what it wants, which is as big a margin and as many seats at the election as they can get hold of, to the extent that Labor then have an absolute mandate to do whatever the hell they want.
And this is, I guess, because to me, really, what was more depressing than the Northwest Shelf decision was the election outcome, because the election outcome has directly led to this. If we were in the situation that I think we were kind of aiming for, which I don't think many other people in the environment movement were aiming for, was a minority government where there was a strong crossbench who could use this as a bargaining chip, or
which was the only plausible route by which a project like the Northwest Shelf could be rejected, was if there was a crossbench big enough and strong enough and willing enough to make this a key bargaining chip, which was on the cards. The Greens were talking about it pre-election. Some of the independents were talking about it pre-election, including two Kates, one in Curtin, one in Fremantle, in various tones and for various durations. Kate Chaney seems to have kind of backflipped herself out of the picture completely at this point. But it's... I think the response from the kind of the agenda setters within the Green movement more broadly was, if anything, it
was explicitly don't talk about gas. Talk about nuclear.
But I think it was almost antithetical to a minority parliament. I'm sure some of them perceive that that's where the real power lies. They're not fucking idiots, but for some reason they managed to kind of corner themselves, box themselves into a position where getting Labor re-elected was the only objective. And then it was ... question mark, lose all our power.
As we've kind of canvassed before, people were too scared of Dutton. They didn't change course once that became clear that wasn't a threat. The environment movement, I think, were even more guilty of that than the Greens.
Well, I was going to say, the last podcast 3 weeks ago, whenever it was, we went in pretty hard on the Greens. I think the Greens made a big strategic error. I don't think they're morally culpable, though. I think they got it wrong, but I don't think they're to blame for that.
So you are saying... So what are you saying then?
I'm saying the environment movement effectively ensured the approval of the Northwest Shelf due to their conduct over the last couple of months of the election campaign and for a long period of time prior to that. The relationship between the Green groups and the Australian Labor Party is such that the ALP does whatever the fuck they want and the Green groups just trail behind after them, kind of trying to get a few scattered crumbs as the ALP basically destroy the table.
Yeah, and they think, oh, maybe next time we'll get a little bit more. We'll be further in the tent, and we can they'll just throw us.
Yeah, I mean,
more
look,
bones.
this again, this is nothing new. We've kind of mapped this out in various ways over the past couple of months. There was a fair degree of frustration during the election campaign coming out in various forms. I mean, including from some of the Greens themselves, Bob Brown and Christine Milne. I wrote about kind of their position, and Bob Brown's been pretty explicitly hostile to ACF in relation to how they've engaged with Labor previously during the first term. I just think that at this point, I mean, what is there to say? It's not even an "I told you so" moment. There's nothing to be taken from because we've managed to exclude ourselves from the halls of power. Effectively.
And I think that now what we need to be doing is making sure that we don't do the same thing in 3 years' time. That needs to be the time frame that we're thinking on now. There's talk, obviously and rightly, about pivoting to Browse, Woodside's Browse project, now that the Northwest Shelf has been approved. Browse is the biggest chunk of the feed, of the gas for that will feed that plant. But I think also there needs to be a thinking about, what does the next parliament look like? It's going to be a Labor government, almost guaranteed at this point, at least it seems. So how do we make sure we don't just end up in the exact same position that we found ourselves in?
And to be clear, that position is one which was absolutely written in stone during the election campaign, where the Green movement broadly, the Greens as a political party, but the Green groups more overtly and explicitly, were so terrified of what a Dutton government would mean for their project and for the future of climate and environment issues in Australia that they went all in on elevating Labor and knocking out Dutton. Despite warnings that there was little difference between the two. You did have independents basically saying, hey, these major parties, they're basically the same on the key issues that we care about. And then lo and behold, within weeks after the election, you've got Albo and the ALP literally rushing through the biggest fossil fuel decision in Australia in recent history, quicker than Peter Dutton would have.
Yeah, and anyone who's really paying attention, that should not surprise them at all. This is the party with the future gas strategy, which is basically more gas for the foreseeable forever.
Yeah.
The
scary thing about Labor is not only that they're beholden to all the interests antithetical to the future of our country, but they're fucking good at it as well. At least the Libs are fucking incompetent. Yeah. At least they can't fucking get a policy through their party room without falling apart in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
The ALP have a fucking 95-seat majority, or 95, whatever. They've got 95 seats in Parliament, and they will just steamroll through precisely the same policies on the key issues when it comes down to actual fucking projects that are going to pump emissions into the atmosphere, destroy the environment, destroy cultural heritage, rip up communities, and deliver nothing for everyday Australians. The ALP are the ones who are going to get that job done quicker than the Duttons and the Liberal parties of this world ever could.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because no one sees it coming. And because everyone goes, oh my God, I can't believe that good old Albo would do precisely what he spent the last fucking 3 years telling us he'd do, which is bend over.
Everything is indicated that he will do. Yeah. I mean, look, as far as I saw during the election campaign, no one was talking about gas aside from Peter Dutton and here locally, Kate Hewlett. The Greens barely were talking about it. They should have absolutely ran with the Northwest Shelf as an election issue and tried to ramp up what we're seeing right now at that time.
Yeah.
And then I was getting told off by people in the environment movement for speaking about gas, speaking about this problem, because they were saying, you're going to get Peter Dutton elected. It's just, and it was all so foreseeable and it's all played out. And I hope that there are some lessons learned, but the early kind of signs are maybe not so good. It seems like things are going to just kind of continue as they have been. And I think everyone's going to be sucking up to Murray Watt because they want to lay claim to these nature laws.
They're doing it. Did you see fucking Kelly O'Shannessy?
I didn't see her actual comments. What were the comments?
I mean, whatever. I've got nothing. I don't know Kelly personally. I've got nothing against her, and ACF have at least been engaging on the rock art on Murujuga. But putting that aside, Kelly rocks up in the Saturday paper last week and it basically says, Murray Watt's a great appointment. He gets shit done. If he approves the Northwest Shelf, it's not his fault. He's just doing what the Labor Party's, policy platform guarantees. In which case, why have you spent the last fucking 3 months doing everything you can to get him elected?
Yeah, that is just that makes my blood boil.
And now Kelly's doing the rounds on breakfast TV and wherever else, basically saying, yeah, shame about the Northwest Shelf. What it really shows is that our nature laws are broken, so we need Labor to come to the table. We need Murray Watt to deliver on the core issue here, which is reforming our broken nature laws. And it's like, mate, I just don't see that happening, because he'll meet with you on Zoom for 30 minutes. He spends fucking 4 hours at the mining summit in Perth. You don't see any fucking photos of that popping up on LinkedIn. And I reckon that's where the real decisions are getting made. Behind closed doors, away from the cameras, not paraded as some fucking like trophy to appease and pay off and, you know, thumb the scale so it looks like you're actually engaging with the environmental issues here.
Yeah. And the thing is as well that in Murray Watt, the environment movement has the perfect enemy. He is so easy to cast as the villain. He looks villainous.
He's great.
He's the best enemy of all time. Like, he's so easy to go up against. You can say, Murray, what the fuck? Like, that's the best line ever.
Yeah.
There's so many opportunities.
Yeah.
And yet they're going to just trying to keep sucking up to him and pandering to him. Like, he's not Plibersek, who I felt quite sorry for and kind of had some degree of like
Tanya's cool
fondness for.
Yeah, totally.
Like,
I mean, I've kind of got a fondness for Murray, but just because he's so perfectly cast as the pantomime villain. Like, he's very good. He's very natural and comfortable embodying that role as the slippery kind of the greaser of the wheels, the cog in the machine.
So if they knew what was good for them, they'd use every opportunity to cast him in that role, to make clear what Labor is doing.
Yeah.
With a mind to 3 years' time, even if you are a Labor Party person, a progressive Labor Party person, surely it's actually in your interests to have a strong crossbench and to have people pushing Labor to do what you want. Well, all these people in lean, what they want is like they should be welcoming external pressure to drive the Labor Party in the direction that they want it to go in.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows the most baffling political naivety to not understand the basic mechanism or language of politics, which is that it's just all about fucking various forms of pressure from different groups and interests. And that's all that moves the needle ultimately is political expediency and what the political cost of action versus inaction boils down to. That's where the rubber hits the road. It's the only thing that's ever mattered. It's the only thing that ever will within liberal democracy. It's not about fucking altruism or what individual actors think is in the best interests of, specific groups of people. No. It's a fucking machine. No. And it does what machines do. It takes in inputs and spits out outputs, and you can predict them. And we predicted them. And I just think the Greenies are fucking deluding themselves if they think you can appeal to the better angels of Murray Watt's nature. Yeah. They're not fucking there.
No.
Murray Watt's nature's broken, not the fucking nature laws.
Nature laws.
Like, deal with it, Jesus.
Yeah, there's no reforming Murray Watt's broken nature.
No.
Look, They got played so badly. That Zoom, that photo that Murray Watt posted on LinkedIn, like that should go in the history books. That is an example of how you fucking play your opponents so hard. You give them the thing they're pining for, and then you weaponize it against them immediately. Like, hats off to the guy.
Oh, I mean, no,
it's good content.
No, completely.
There's nothing we love better than good content, it's good content.
The second best piece of content to come out of this week after the fucking esteemed British guy in the cable knit sweater ripping up the fucking 8-page printout from UWA. I mean, it's good gear, 100%. And Murray's great. The environment groups don't seem to recognise a good opponent when they've got one. Like, I just don't think they want to play the game. I don't think they must know how the game works, but they seem like just fatally unable.
I guess that's the question. How much appetite do they actually have for it, and how much do they believe they can achieve? Like that's
Yeah.
When I want to get in touch with the common person, I generally look in the comments on my Big State TikTok channel. And there was someone in there the other day saying, what the fuck? I didn't hear about this before the election. We need to have a revote. And you can't blame that person for thinking that, because why would they have heard of this? Even though it is, I think, the second biggest fossil fuel approval in Australian history, even though it's like the biggest gas export facility in the Southern Hemisphere, even though it's going decades past when we've got all these climate targets and whatnot. Like, you'd think that this would have been a defining issue of the election. But I mean, Labor are good at politics. They've
they are, and I mean, I'll maybe write something about this rather than kind of spitting it out here and now. But I think they've learned a lot from WA Labor, who are, if they're one thing, they're extremely fucking good at retail politics and at oiling a machine until it's almost kind of impregnable. And yeah, the other thing that the two have got in common, federal Labor and WA Labor, is there's no fucking opposition. The Libs aren't there. The only opposition, like the environmental movement, could be the opposition. Like there is no right. There is no functional right-wing faction in this country right now. There's fucking Gerard Rennick and there's, I don't know, Bob Katter in Queensland. Like, apart from that, the Liberal Party room is in disarray. There's no opposition there at all. And so if you wanted to frame Murray Watton Labor as a kind of, as a centrist, centre-right threat to, you know, values that everyday Australians hold dear, the floor's yours. But if they don't have the appetite for it, another opposition will emerge. Maybe it'll be the independents we keep talking about.
I mean, I feel like it kind of, by de facto at the moment, kind of is the independents.
It'll be independents of some stripe.
Yeah, and it's this bizarre situation where you've got these MPs for these traditionally conservative seats who are calling out the Labor Party on the North West Shelf. Like, that is kind of bizarre, and just does tell you about where the Labor Party are at. And
even people like Jackie Lambie down in Tasmania have been doing it really effectively and will continue doing it. I mean, I don't know where it takes us in 3 years' time, but if the Green groups aren't going to do it, someone will.
I mean, I think the other thing that a lot of this has shown as well is that the kind of Australia Institute lines around the kind of big gases taking the piss, big gases ripping us off, all going off seas, barely any royalties, barely any taxes. That has connected really well. I mean, I know I've been running those lines, so maybe I've got some skin in the game here, but I think that the Green groups also would do well to pick up some of that. And I think that is obviously what is going to connect with people on this, and is a large part of what has been connecting with people on this, as well as, of course, the rock art, which, you know, I think the rock art stuff, even if you don't actually care about the rock art, just the level of corruption that we've seen in the report is outrageous to most people. And they want a government that doesn't do that shit. They want a government that does what it says it's going to do.
Well, we've got a government that does that shit. And they're going to keep doing that shit as freely as they see fit for the next 3 years. I don't know. There's more to play on this one. I do think the kind of the rock art corruption, the degree of connivance within the WA government is probably going to be subject to more investigation and expose over the next period. Like, I reckon there's more to run on this. There's more to run on UNESCO and the speed with which the federal government immediately tried to kind of drown that out by just rushing the project through. The North West Shelf ain't a done deal yet. Obviously, at a core level, they haven't got the gas for it until they can get Browse up and running. So that's kind of where the environmental pressure will shift, no doubt. There's still court cases that are kind of in the works and on foot.
And there's probably whole other conversations we maybe don't have time for now about what that Browse campaign will and should look like, and how you might be able to leverage what we've seen in the last couple of weeks into something that's actually going to be effective there. I mean, I'm personally not thinking about that until I've had a few weeks off. Fair enough.
Don't know how the energy's been in the room, the Savo, but I'm pretty done, I reckon, for a little bit. It's been a big 2025 with back-to-back election campaigns and then straight into the North West Shelf.
Here I was thinking there'd be a couple of weeks to chill, but no such luck.
Nah, I'm off down south, and then I might try and finally get to the US for a few weeks. And then I guess, you look at what does the back half of 2025 look like? Where does state and federal parliament and politics kind of land? And what are the levers that we've got to pull at this point? I'm keen to dig a bit deeper into the dirty history behind how you cook up a rock art report to order and how it all falls apart as quickly as it does. A rare moment of actual political incompetence from WA Labor, honestly. I'm calling it. And it might come back to bite them. Who knows? I reckon this is the one that really bells the cat. I would be surprised if there wasn't more to play on this little scandal.
I mean, I guess it depends how deep it goes, how much more there is to mine.
Well, it was caretaker period all the way through the first half of 2025. up to the election, which is when this report was being massaged and manipulated into its final form. So I would say the buck stops with good old Roger Cook. I reckon if there's fingerprints on this one, they're probably his. So I guess the question is how much evidence have they left behind?
Yeah.
We'll see.
All right. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
That's that.
That's that. We're done. It's
done.
over.
Yeah.
That's a wrap.
Cool. Shelved.
Yeah. See what see what fuck, I don't know. It's been a long campaign.
It's been a long campaign. Yeah. I'm cooked.
Yeah. We'll find something else to talk about, I'm sure. Soon enough. But I mean, yeah, long story short, it's all fucking one big thing now.
Would you do it all again? Would you, going back to 2020 or thereabouts when we kind of both, I think, started getting engaged in this?
This is the thing, right? Like it's been, I don't know. I've got no choice.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
As soon as you fucking go up there and see the place for yourself, it does something that you kind of can't get away from. Just the kind of the scale, the grandeur, the kind of the sweeping forces and themes are so like they're pretty. This is the big one. This is the big sort of. This is where it all converges.
Yeah.
The Burrup Hub kind of really has it all in terms of the forces, themes, dynamics that drive our time.
Yeah.
It's the story's too good to let go of, really.
Yeah. And also we can ask ourselves that question, would we do it again? But for the people who are really kind of at the pointy end of this, the traditional custodians of Murujuga, they can't ask themselves this question. It's
well, and it's been done to them.
Yeah.
Since day dot, since this all started.
Exactly.
Since the rock art stopped and the industry started, this is what's been going on.
Over generations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're still there living 20 people to a 3-room house in Roebourne.
Yep.
With the power kind of going on and off. And not enough food.
Yep.
So
and still pushing back.
Yeah, indeed. So I mean that is truly what it ultimately comes down to is while there is still stories to be told, I imagine that we're going to be kind of listening and helping tell them.
Yeah.
But not next week. Next week I'm fucking off to the bush for a few days.
Good idea. All right. Well, we'll see. Who knows? We've been going for almost an hour. We might have to edit some parts out. So who knows how long the final part will be.
You can bleep out the names of some conservation group CEOs and I'll cut the bits where I disclose personal conversations with journalists.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe one day we'll release the extended cut. Who knows for paid subscribers.
Riveting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Cheers.
See ya.
See ya.